Hi. If you're planning ahead and you want to get a U.S. passport or you want to renew your passport, you're in the right place. Now, if this had been a year or two ago when I made this video and you clicked on it, I would have thought, well, they're going on a cruise or they want to travel abroad someplace. And that's why they need to get their U.S. passport. But now, I'll make you a bet there are a number of you who are concerned about Trump's SAVE Act, which is, hasn't been passed yet. But if that gets passed, there's going to be an onslaught of people applying for U.S. passports because they're going to have to prove that they're U.S. citizens to be able to vote. And they might not want to be carrying their birth certificate around. So you might be planning ahead for that at this point. But anyway, you're in the right place because I'm going to talk about the whole process to get a passport book or a passport card. For an adult to get a passport, for a child to get a passport, to renew the passport. Who cannot get a passport? There are certain people who are not allowed, and I don't mean folks who aren't U.S. citizens. I'm talking about U.S. citizens that aren't allowed to get passports. So anyway, you're in the right spot, so settle back. This is probably going to be about a 20-25 minute video, and you can skip through parts of it if you already know some of this information. So it's a good idea that you're planning ahead in case that SAVE Act gets passed, but millions of Americans don't have passports. When I lived in my 20s in Central America and South America, and everybody thought, all the natives, they thought every American had a U.S. passport because the place was just teeming with us. And they just thought everybody, Americans are rich and they all travel a lot. At the time, which I'm going to say was in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, I had heard the number was 12% of Americans had U.S. passports. So in preparation of this video, I went and did my own research on it, and it's kind of interesting. Oh, I had also heard, this is when I was living in Costa Rica. This is right around the Nicaraguan Revolution, and that's 78. And I had heard from Chilean friends of mine that everybody knows that if you've gotten a U.S. passport, the CIA has a file open on you, so you have to be careful about what you do. And that turns out to not be true. But at the end, I'm going to tell you there are agencies that open up records on you if you have a passport. But we'll talk about that at the end, and not to scare you. Anyway, for the statistics, very, very interesting to me. As of the most recent U.S. government data, about half of Americans have a valid U.S. passport. I find that shocking. I find that very surprising. But according to what I found, in fiscal year 2025, there were approximately 183 million valid U.S. passports. And that includes both the passport books and the cards. The U.S. population is roughly 340 million. That works out to be about 54% of the population has a passport. Kind of surprising. Now, around 1990, this is more like it, around 1990, only about 5% of Americans had a passport. So how does it jump from 5% to 54% in 36 years? There's a reason. I'll tell you in a second. By 2006, so 1990 it was 5%, 2006 it was 20%. That's still a huge jump, right? In 26 years, it's jumping from 20% to 54%. Well, I'll tell you why that is. Because passports became required for a lot of trips to neighboring countries that previously didn't require them. You remember when you could go back and forth between Canada and Mexico, and you just showed them your driver's license? Those days are over, okay? Now, does Mexico or Canada require citizens to have a passport? That depends on how you're traveling. If you're traveling by air, yes, to both of them. yes, you should have a U.S. passport if you're going to travel by air in or out of Mexico or Canada. Now, if you're traveling by land, um, Canada recommends carrying a valid passport. However, U.S. citizens can enter Canada by land or sea with two things. They need an identity document, which is usually going to be a driver's license, and they also want proof of U.S. citizenship, which is basically your birth certificate or your naturalization certificate. Mexico, by air, yes. U.S. citizens need a valid U.S. passport book to enter Mexico by air. By land, sometimes if you're like along the border, the Mexico will let U.S. citizens enter without a passport, but you're going to have a problem getting back in. You might be able to get into Mexico, but when you're trying to get back into the United States, our Border Patrol are going to want to see your passport card. So the first big question, very easy. Who's eligible to get a U.S. passport? Obviously, U.S. citizens. And that's people born in the United States, people who've been naturalized. Maybe they acquired or derived citizenship from their parents or something. Let's say they were born abroad. So they got a certificate of citizenship, not a naturalization certificate. They got a certificate of citizenship. And if you're unsure about your citizenship status, it's a good idea to confirm it. And I'm just going to tell you one quick story about this. I had a guy come in to see me, I'm going to say it was somewhere around 2010. And he and his wife, he was in his mid to late 50s, I guess. He and his wife wanted to go on a cruise. They had never left the country, and they were going to take this cruise. So he had gone to get a U.S. passport, and they wouldn't give it to him because they wanted to see his birth certificate. And he says, oh, well, I wasn't born here. I was born in Germany. He says, well, how are you supposed to get a U.S. passport if you're not a U.S. citizen? He says, well, I think I am. I mean, I served in the Army. I mean, all these years, he thought I was a U.S. citizen. He was not. So we ended up being able to, he had no information. His parents had both passed. And so he had he didn't have his alien number, had nothing about how he came here. And we were able to do a FOIA for his mother and his father since they were both deceased. And it turns out that we did one for him too, but nothing came up. So we did his mother and his father, and sure enough, he had traveled as an infant from Germany to the United States, and he was on his mother's passport because he was an infant. And through that, we were able to find out what his alien number was. He at least had an alien number. So I'm going to be doing a video later about him because we got residence for him through the registry program, which is a program where you have to have been here since 1972 to qualify. They haven't changed that date. Since 1986, they have not changed that date. So that would be a helpful way for people to be able to legalize if they would at least update that date to like 2010 or something. But anyway, he ended up, I think he did take that cruise, but I think he took that cruise as a German national, a German citizen, and as a permanent resident of the United States. He didn't do it that year, but I assume he did it the following year. But we had to get him a German birth certificate and a German pass. Well, he had the German birth certificate, but we had to get a German passport for him. And so, you think, I also had another client around that same time period, I'd say. He come to see me, and he was, well, we say, he's not very sophisticated, which basically means he doesn't have a lot of education. And his parents had been farm workers up here. They were from Mexico, and they had him while they were living here. And then once the season was over, they took him back to Mexico, and he grew up in Mexico. But he, once he was a man, came up and followed in his father's footsteps, and he also came up to make some money and did a lot of the farm work that a lot of our people don't want to do. So somehow he had made his way from California over to Philadelphia. What he was doing in Philly, I have no idea. But he came to see me, and he wanted help finding his U.S. birth certificate because he knew that he had been born in California. He knew the date, but he didn't know where because his parents didn't know where. And I tried some little efforts, I guess, around San Diego and LA and stuff. But it's like a needle in a haystack. I have no idea how, at this time, how to find his birth certificate. So he can't prove he's a U.S. citizen. So anyway, and another time that showed up was with DACA. A lot of times, the parents never told the kids that they weren't born here. And these kids grew up here. Let's say they came in at 1 or 2, maybe 3, and they'd gone to school here. You'd never know that they weren't U.S. citizens. They speak perfect English. They're just like every other teenager. But then DACA comes along, and the parents are like, you got to do this. So, because at least this way you'll have some legal status. And that's when they have to come clean and explain to the kids that, by the way, you weren't really born here. So that was a big shocker for a lot of the DACA kids. But so don't just presume that you were born here. Make sure you get a copy of your birth certificate. That's step 1 towards getting a passport. Obviously, if you're naturalized, you're going to need that naturalization certificate. So passport book or passport card? First of all, a passport book is exactly what you think of when you say the word passport. It's the passport. It looks like a book. The passport card is, it's about this big or so. And it's cheaper, but it has a lot of limitations to it. And bottom line, I'm going to tell you, is just get a passport. It'll be a whole lot easier. The passport card can only be used for land and sea travel, which means no international travel, no air travel. So it can be used for land and sea travel between the U.S. and certain neighboring countries like Canada, Mexico, Bermuda, and many Caribbean destinations. So in my ever so humble opinion, I would strongly suggest that you just get a passport book. It's easier. Well, it's actually not easier, but it's better. First time applicants, okay. If you've never had a U.S. passport, or you don't qualify to renew your passport, which is me, you'll generally need to use Form DS-11. And unlike a renewal application, you can't just fill it out and then mail it in yourself. You're going to have to go to what they call is a passport acceptance facility. They are, generally speaking, USPS offices. There might be some shipping companies that do that. Like I just Googled something else about, who cannot get a U.S. passport. And FedEx came up with all this information about U.S. passports. So I didn't click on it, but I thought, well, there you go. If there's a FedEx office near you, they probably do this as well. I also Googled this a few days ago when I was doing this script. I Googled it to see, well, where can I apply close to where I am? And it came up this post office over here, this post office over here, and that post office over there. But it also gave me my county seat, the center of my county. So, I would think that I know you can do it in Philadelphia because there's actually a passport agency in Philadelphia, like 2nd Street. I don't know. That's from a while ago. But so you can either do it like in close to your a big town or wherever the head of your county is. You'll be able to do it there. So what do you need? We've already talked about that. You need your U.S. birth certificate, your naturalization certificate, your certificate of citizenship, um, or a previous U.S. passport, but that's for renewals. And by the way, when you go, let's say you're going to go over to the post office to do this, you've printed out the form, and now you're going to go over to the post office. You've got your birth certificate with you. Make sure you have an original. You might want to bring an original and a photocopy with you just to give them the photocopy. But they're going to want to see, they need to see your original certificate or your original naturalization certificate. You're also going to need proof of identity, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be your driver's license. It's something that's issued by the state that has your photograph on it. A military ID is okay. I kind of think that a school, like a university ID, I don't think that's okay. I think it has to be a state-issued identification card. You're going to need some passport photos. They're very specific about, what size they have to be. And you're not allowed that. Well, first of all, they have to be recent. They have to be in color. They have to be against a white background. A little piece of advice, just so that you know. If you're going to go to Walgreens or someplace or some other place that says passport photos, you're going to go there. They're going to stand you up against a white background and they're going to take your picture, right? Well, do yourself a favor and don't go on a cloudy day, okay? Because that background, even though it looks white to you, that background is going to show up as gray. And I've seen more than one passport photo get rejected because the background was the wrong color. So don't go on a rainy day. Another thing, not allowed to smile. Don't smile. They don't like that. You're not supposed to wear glasses. You're not supposed to wear hats or any kind of headgear. Although I did have somebody probably 5-6 years ago that she was a Muslim woman. She was a Muslim woman, and she always wore her, I never know what the word is. I always say hijab or jihab or something. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just can never remember what that word is. I'll put it on the screen. But it's a nice little head covering that she had. And we were able to, now this was with the immigration service, but so it's not a passport photo, but we had to give a written explanation as to why this head covering was necessary. So we prepared something regarding her religious beliefs. Sometimes it's also for medical reasons. Can't think of any, but it might be for medical reasons as well, that you need to have your head covered. But I'm pretty sure hats are not going to be accepted. What else? Passport fees. Okay. You're going to need to pay the fees. Now, this is for a brand new passport, right? It's $130 for an adult, and it's plus $35. That's the facility acceptance fee. I guess that's the cut that USPS gets. So it's $130 plus $35, $165. If you only want the passport card, it's only $30 plus the $35. Or for children under 16, the passport book is going to be $100, and the passport card is $15, also plus $35. Now, if you need to get this thing done quickly, it can be expedited, but they're going to charge you for it. They're also willing to send it to you like overnight or 2-day delivery. There's an extra charge for that. So plan ahead of time so you don't have to rush and have this thing, pushed through. That way you don't have to pay the extra fees. Another question that you get a lot talking about this is how long is this going to take? And as of December 2025, it's now August of 2026, they said they're taking 6 to 8 weeks. And like I said, it can be expedited if you want it to be and if you're willing to pay for it. Now, how about if you just need to renew your passport? Okay, that's got a different form. That's form DS-82. That's presuming that you meet the eligibility requirements. Um, it's generally easier because you don't have to bring in all the other documents that you need. So it's easier than applying for the first time. But as of right now, you cannot renew your passport and have to apply for a new one if the passport that you originally had was issued to you before you were 16. If it was issued more than 15 years ago, that's the category I'm in at this point. I'm like, I just missed it. We went traveling in 2009. That was the last time I had a passport. I'm like, shoot, I just missed it. But I don't know. I don't think I'll be traveling anytime soon, but you never know. If the passport's been damaged, lost, or stolen, then you have to report it, and you're not allowed to just renew it because you don't have it. If it was issued in a previous name, like if you were married when you got your last one and now you're divorced, more likely it's the other way around, where you bring in your birth certificate and you get your passport in your maiden name, and then you get married. You're going to have to bring in not just your birth certificate but also your marriage certificate to prove that you did legally change your name. You didn't just create a new name. So they're the folks who can't renew their passport. If you're outside the United States, you have to contact the local embassy or U.S. consulate close to you. So a U.S. passport for an adult is valid for 10 years. If you're getting one for a child, it's going to be good for 5 years because they change so often. And applicants under 16 generally, now here's what happens with this. Let's say you're going to apply for your kids, right? Applicants under 16 generally have to appear in person, and both parents are supposed to also appear. But I remember when I did my kids, they didn't have to appear. I did that on my own, but I was friends with the guy at the post office. But and their father didn't appear, but we did have to have a letter from him, which of course I created and had him review and sign, but he didn't want to take off time from work. But he at least knew that the girls were getting their passports, and he gave me a copy of he was a permanent resident, so I took a copy of his green card. And so he didn't have to appear, but generally speaking, they want both parents there, and that's just because they don't want to have a passport issued for a child that the other parent doesn't know has a passport. And so if there's like a big huge fight and one of let's say the mom decides, well, screw this, I'm going back home and I'm taking the kid with me, or a lot of times it's the father will take the kid. That's what you always hear about, that the father takes the kid and then won't tell the mother where the child is. But I think a lot of times mothers take the kids home too, but I think generally they need help financially to get home, so the dad knows. That's just my personal opinion. That's not my professional opinion. Okay, I probably should cut some of that. And you can't renew a child's passport. You always have to reappear. Now, lost or stolen passports, basically, if it's lost, you have to contact the State Department. There is another form, DS-64. So if you lost it, you should contact the State Department as soon as you possibly can. You can fill out the form DS-64 either online or by mail. You should do that as soon as you can so that they can cancel it. It's kind of like if you lost a credit card, right? You'd have to contact the credit bureau or the credit company that issued that card so that they'll stop the card. You can't use it again. If you report it, you can't, and then you find it 3 days later, you're not allowed to use it. You're going to have to get a new one. If it's been stolen, you should do that, but you should also contact the police and let them know that this passport was stolen. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about who can't get. I have 10 common mistakes and then who can't get passports. I'm going to do that first. I'm going to skip down here to the bottom where I put that. Hold on a second. Okay, there are a few things that will disqualify you from getting a passport. If you have a felony on your record, you will not be able to get a passport. And this includes any felony that is punishable by 1 year in prison. Now, listen to what I just said, right? It's not that you served 1 year in prison, it's punishable by 1 year in prison. So let's say you have some kind of a felony, but you only spent 6 months in jail. That's not a big deal. But you could have gotten a year or more. You're probably going to have a problem getting a passport. If you've been convicted of a crime that includes terrorist activities, espionage, which is spying, and drug trafficking. Okay, so they're big no-nos as well. And lastly, if you have been judged to be mentally deficient or defective, or you were involuntarily committed to an institution for mental treatment, you won't be eligible for a passport. However, I would think, let's say you had a problem in your early 20s and you were, involuntarily committed, and now you're 45 or 50 years old and you want to take that cruise with your spouse, I would think you could talk to an attorney, and he or she might be able to help you prepare a statement that says you should be allowed to get a passport. But that's going to entail getting your medical records. That's going to entail getting another, some kind of examination by a medical doctor now that says you're, like a psychiatrist, let's say, that says you're fine. That's going to entail a lot of money and a lot of time. And that's why I would strongly suggest don't just go on ChatGPT to figure out how to do it. I would hire a professional, hire an attorney to do this for you, because there's probably words of art that he or she would be using. So the very last thing I want to talk about are all these mistakes. And by the way, if you're liking this, if this is helping you, hit like. If you want more videos, check out my channel. You can see what type of videos that I do. I'm not like the other immigration attorneys. I am not trying to get your work. I'm retired, and I just try to give informative videos. That's what I'm trying to make, informative videos, so that people understand what the difference is between this, that, and something else. Like, what's the difference between a habeas corpus motion or a mandamus motion? I'm going to do one about U.S. Marshals, because that came up as a subject. And I thought, I wonder what the U.S. Marshals actually do. I don't know. So I'm going to do that probably in a couple of weeks. I'll do the U.S. Marshals one. But look through my stuff, and if you like this type of video where it's informative, I am an attorney. I'm a retired attorney. And just hit subscribe. If you think that this might be useful to, maybe you're on Reddit or something, or you're in some group that you think this would be helpful for the people in my group about, let's say, like U.S. travelers, people who want to travel abroad, people who are thinking about moving abroad, it might be helpful to them to see a video like this about how to prepare to get your U.S. passport. So share it with people, like it, subscribe, greatly appreciate it. Back to the 10 problems. Well, 10 big mistakes. Well, we've already talked about a bunch of them. Number one, waiting too long. Okay, I've always said this about my clients, that most of the time, the problems that my clients had weren't caused because they did things they shouldn't do. It was because they didn't do what they could do when they could do it. So don't delay. Don't delay, especially if for some reason this SAFE thing goes through and we're going to have to prove U.S. citizenship to be able to vote. Then there's going to be a flood of people, not just applying for U.S. passports, but applying for their U.S. birth certificate, right? Because they're going to need that first. So if you don't have that, that's step one. So get that U.S. Birth certificate first, and then apply for your passport as soon as you can. And I've always said this to my immigration clients: once you become a naturalized citizen, apply for your U.S. passport, because what happens, if you lose your U.S. passport, it's not that hard to have it replaced. But if you lose your naturalization certificate, even 5 years ago, it took a year to get that replaced. So always get a U.S. passport, and that way you have two different ways to prove that you are a U.S. citizen. Number two, another reason is you use the wrong form. So make sure you're using the correct form. Make sure you're sending in the right amount of money. The prices that I gave you, I found, within the last day or two, up on the Department of State's website. So those prices are accurate as of August 2026, but who knows? They can always raise them. Sending in photocopies instead of sending in originals, that's a problem. Okay. This is sort of me. I'm not going on a cruise, but it says not checking the expiration date of an existing passport until travel is already booked. So I didn't check the expiration date on my passport until I'm making this, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if it's been more than 15 years. Yeah, it's been like 16 years. I just blew the deadline. Brilliant. So make sure that you check that passport expiration date so you're not under the gun to get a new passport. Oh, and the last two are true of just about everything that you do if you're dealing with the government. One is not making a copy of the important documents before you submit them. You should always have a file on this stuff. So the one is not making copies of it, and two is not saving them. You made the copies, but you don't know what you do. Where did I put those copies? Come on, get organized. You can do it. And, one last thing. Remember I said that I thought that the CIA opened up a file on us? That's what I was told when I was 20 and living in Costa Rica. No, that's not true, because they're not allowed to do domestic surveillance. But I think it's interesting that I heard that when I was living abroad, and the CIA does operate abroad. I don't know about that. They're saying it's not true, but the Department of State, obviously, that's who runs the consuls and the embassies. And that's also who you're applying for a passport from. They create a passport record for you. But it's got all your stuff. It's got your issuance and renewal history. It's got your application, your photo, your proof of citizenship, your identity documents, your payment information. So it's got what you would expect it to have. Now, other agencies are also CBP, the Border Patrol. They keep records of your entries and your departures from the country. So they'll keep track of your travel. Oh, that's the one I wanted to look up. The transportation, I'm going to highlight it so I don't forget it. The Transportation Security Administration. Something I don't think I've ever heard of. The Transportation Security Administration maintains certain records related to airline security screening. Like, did you ever try to bring something in that you weren't supposed to? Transportation Security Administration. Oh, that's the TSA. Never mind. I have heard of it. I'm not losing my marbles. I have heard of it. That's the TSA. So they keep records of of the security, the airline security stuff. And if you become the subject of a criminal investigation, agencies such as the FBI may maintain investigative records, but those are created because of an investigation, not because you applied for a passport. And that's it. So if supposedly the CIA doesn't open up a file on you, but if they did, would they tell you? I don't think so. I don't know. Anyway, don't make that. Don't have that. Don't have that be a reason to not get a passport. And try to do it as soon as you possibly can. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Share if you think that this would be useful to somebody else. I really appreciate it that you've been able to last this long. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.